Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCGplayer affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So the first rule of this deck tech is, you do not talk about this deck tech. The second rule of this deck tech is, you do not talk about this deck tech. Fight Club, get it? Yeah, okay, anyways, let's jump into it. So the ground rules for my deck techs are as follows. The budget is $50 or less, and that's an overall deck cost. So that cost includes shipping as well as commanders as long as they're $10 or less, but basic lands will not be included in that price. On my deck techs, I'm going to take you through the strategy, the tactics, and how the deck wins. Today's episode comes to you courtesy of Tom, who's been supporting this channel as a general tier patron. I truly couldn't do this without the support from amazing patrons like Tom. And today, Tom's going to handle the intro for me.
Hey Mitch, this is Tom from California. For my deck tech, I would like to see you build around Neyith of the Dire Hunt, focusing on the fight theme. Looking forward to see how your Gruul brew looks like.
So as Tom said, today's deck tech is going to be built around Neyith of the Dire Hunt with a fight theme. Neyith is a 3/3 human warrior that costs 2 green. She has whenever one or more creatures you control fight or become blocked, draw a card. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 2 and a Gruul, and if you do, double target creature's power until end of turn. That creature must be blocked this combat if able. So Neyith actually does a lot of things, but the way to get the most value out of her, in my opinion, is fight. For each separate instance of fight, we're going to be drawing a card. So unlike that become blocked clause, we can draw more than one card in a turn. So with fighting, we can take out our opponent's creatures while gaining card advantage. So the strategy for this deck is very straightforward. We're going to get creatures out and start some fights. We have creatures that fight either once or multiple times, and we've got plenty of spells that can help us fight as well. And then how we win with this deck is pretty straightforward. We're going to decimate our opponent's armies and then swing through. After taking our opponent's creatures out, it's going to be very easy for us to take them out too. And as always with deck techs on this channel, I'm going to take you through 10 different tactics that show you how this deck works and how we're going to win with it. So let's start things off with tactic number 1, hunt for resources. First up, there's Fauna Fertility, which is kind of like a green enchantment Wayfarer's Bauble. And then we've got another great turn 1 play with Search for Tomorrow. It has to spend 2 for a green and gets us 1 basic land into play untapped. Next up, some great turn 2 plays come with Rampant Growth, Sakura Tribe Elder, and Edge of Autumn. Both Rampant Growth and Sakura Tribe Elder are going to get us a basic land into play tapped. And then Edge of Autumn does the same if we've got 4 or fewer lands, and we can also cycle it by sacrificing a land. Next up, we've got some 3-mana ramp spells with Cultivate, Harrow, and Grow from the Ashes. Cultivate gets us 1 basic into play tapped and 1 into our hand. At the cost of sacrificing 1 land, Harrow gets us 2 basics into play untapped. And then Grow from the Ashes gets us 1 basic into play untapped or 2 if we kicked it. Next up, we've got 3 cards that are basically better versions of Explosive Vegetation with Circuitous Route, Vastwood Surge, and Migration Path. Circuitous Route can get us up to 2 basic lands and or gate cards into play tapped. Vastwood Surge gets us 2 basics, and we can also kick it to get 2+1 counters on each creature we control. And Migration Path can either get us 2 basics into play tapped, or we can cycle it for 2. And finally, there's Ronus' Monument, which is going to make our green creature spells cost 1 less to cast. And on top of that, whenever we cast a creature spell, target creature we control gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. So this can help reduce the cost of a lot of our spells and can make our creatures even deadlier. But now that we're done talking about ramp, let's talk about fighting. So now it's time for us to move on to tactic number 2. In this corner! First up, there's Kogla, which when it comes into play, it fights up to 1 target creature we don't control. On top of that, whenever it attacks, we destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. And if that wasn't enough, we can also pay 1 in a green and return target human we control back to its owner's hand, and then Kogla gains indestructible until end of turn. So this can fight a creature, destroy artifacts and enchantments, and it can protect our commander as well. And then there's Ravager Worm, which has Riot, and when it enters the battlefield, we choose up to 1. It can fight target creature we don't control, or can destroy target land with activated ability that isn't a mana ability. Next up, there's Gargos Vicious Watcher, which has whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell, Gargos Vicious Watcher fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. We've got plenty of spells in this deck that target, so this is going to be fighting plenty. And speaking of fighting a lot, we've also got Gruul Rage Beast, Thorn Mammoth, and Ulvenwald Tracker. Gruul Rage Beast has when Gruul Rage Beast or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature fights target creature an opponent controls. Thorn Mammoth has whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Thorn Mammoth fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. And then Ulvenwald Tracker has pay 1 in a green and tap it, target creature you control fights another target creature. These can all help us fight a ton and draw a lot of cards. And finally, we've got Guild Feud, which is an enchantment that can also help us fight a lot. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent reveals the top 3 cards of their library, may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield and puts the rest into their graveyard. You do the same with the top 3 cards of your library. If 2 creatures are put onto the battlefield this way, those creatures fight each other. Chances are there's going to be at least one opponent out there that doesn't have a creature-based deck like ours is. So we pick them and they either whiff or get a small creature and we get one of our big creatures and kill it. So not only are we getting free value by cheating our creature into play, but we're also going to be drawing a card with that fight. This can really provide us a lot of value throughout the game. But we're nowhere near done talking about fighting just yet. So now let's move on to tactic number 3, Fight Club. And remember, we don't talk about Fight Club. But we will in this tactic. You know what I mean. First up, we've got some 1-mana fight spells with Prey Upon, Savage Swipe, and Primal Might. On top of fighting, Savage Swipe is going to give target creature +2/+2 until end of turn if its power is 2. And then Primal Might can also pump a creature if we put mana into X. And then we've got some 2-mana fight spells with Titanic Brawl, Pit Fight, and Pounce. And Titanic Brawl can even cost us 1 less if it targets a creature we control with a +1/+1 counter on it. And then we've got some fight spells that can pump as well with Ancient Animus, Epic Confrontation, and Savage Punch. Ancient Animus puts a +1/+1 counter on that creature if it's legendary. Epic Confrontation gives +1/+2, and Savage Punch gives +2/+2 if we control a creature with power 4 or greater. Next up, there's Warbriar Blessing, which is a fight aura that's going to give +0/+2. And then Go for Blood lets us fight, or we can cycle it for 1. Inscription of Abundance is an incredibly flexible kicker spell. It says choose 1, if this spell is kicked, choose any number instead. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. Target creature you control fights another target creature you don't control. And speaking of flexible, we're also going to be running Colony Ambush, which is a fight spell, or it's a land. Now, as good as all these fight spells are, we've got one that clearly stands above the rest. And that's going to be the Golden Pick of this deck, which is the number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pick of this deck is Citizen Tactics. It's an instant for 1 and a green, but it has Strive. It's going to cost green more to cast for each target beyond the first. It says until end of turn, any number of target creatures get +1/+1 and gain tap. This creature fights another target creature. So this is an instant speed fight spell for multiple creatures, and it pumps them too. And because we can tap those creatures whenever we want, we're going to get multiple instances of fight. So this can help us take out a ton of creatures and draw us a lot of cards. This can come out of nowhere and give us a huge advantage, and that's what makes this the Golden Pig. Now, we've got plenty of creatures in this deck that we can use for fighting, but we've got some that actually want to fight. Let's go over those now in tactic number 4, Hit Me. First up, there's Ranging Raptors, which has Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. So whenever this fights, it's going to ramp us. And then Silverclad Ferocidons can be very brutal. It has Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, each opponent sacrifices a permanent. Next up, there's Hungering Hydra, which can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, and whenever it's dealt damage, we put that many +1/+1 counters on it. And then whenever Broodhatch Nantuko is dealt damage, we create that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens. And similarly, we've got Hornet's Nest, which whenever it's dealt damage, we get that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens with Flying and Death Touch onto the battlefield. And those Death Touch tokens are extremely deadly in a fight deck. So we're also running Hornet Queen, which is a 2/2 with Flying and Death Touch, but she also comes into play with 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with Flying and Death Touch. Again, trading a 1/1 with Death Touch for our opponent's best creature is a really good deal. Finally, we've got some indestructible creatures with Predator Ooze and Brash Taunter. Whenever Predator Ooze attacks, we put a +1/+1 counter on it, and whenever a creature dealt damage by Predator Ooze this turn dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Predator Ooze. And then Brash Taunter has whenever it's dealt damage, deals that much damage to target opponent. And by paying 2 in a red and tapping it, it's going to fight another target creature. So this can fight on its own and dish out a ton of damage to our opponents. But we still have some other creatures that can win a lot of fights for us. So let's go over them now in tactic number 5, Hit Hard. First up, there's Aggressive Mammoth, which is an 8/8 with Trample for 6, and it also gives other creatures we control Trample. So this can win a ton of fights and give us a huge benefit as well. Speaking of winning fights, we've also got Aetherwind Basker, which starts off as a 7/7 with Trample, but we can make it a lot bigger than that. Because whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, we get an energy for each creature we control, and by paying an energy, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So we can essentially adjust this to whatever power we need to win our fights. And we've also got Enraged Forerunners, which can power up all of our creatures, because when it enters the battlefield, other creatures we control get +2/+2 and gain Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. So this is a big threat that makes all of our creatures into even bigger threats, and yeah, it can help us dish out a ton of damage to finish our opponents off. But outside of our commander drawing his cards, we've got plenty of other ways to get to all these great cards. So let's go over those ways in tactic number 6, Look Around. First up, we've got some creatures that can help us tutor with Fierce Empath and Munvali Beast Tracker. When Fierce Empath enters the battlefield, we can search our library for a creature card with converted mana costs of 6 or later and put it into our hand. And when Munvali Beast Tracker enters the battlefield, we search our library for a creature card with Death Touch, Hexproof, Reach, or Trample. We reveal it, then we shuffle our library and put that card on top of it. Both have a ton of great targets to tutor for in this deck. Next, we've got some ways to recur some cards with Skullwinder, Charmbreaker Devils, and Reap the Past. Skullwinder has Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand, then choose an opponent. That player returns that card from their graveyard to their hand. So we can use this card politically, and it also has Death Touch, and remember, Death Touch is fantastic with fighting. And then Charmbreaker Devil says at the beginning of your upkeep, return an instant or sorcery card at random from your graveyard to your hand. On top of that, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +4/+0 until end of turn. And then Reap the Past is going to return X cards at random from our graveyard to hand, then we exile Reap the Past. And finally, we're also going to be running Shamanic Revelation and Return of the Wild Speaker. Shamanic Revelation is going to draw a card for each creature we control, and we gain 4 life for each creature we control with power 4 or greater. And Return of the Wild Speaker says choose 1, draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, and non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. So drawing cards and doing what we want to do is great, but sometimes we need to throw a wrench into our opponent's plans. So let's talk about some ways to do that in tactic number 7, throw out. First up, there's Reclamation Sage, which when it enters the battlefield, we can destroy a target artifact or enchantment. And then Acidic Slime is very similar, but it also has Death Touch and it can destroy land instead of that artifact or enchantment. Finally, we've got some standard removal spells with Return to Nature, Unravel the Aether, and Deglamour. Return to Nature is very flexible. It says destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile target card from a graveyard. And then Unravel the Aether and Deglamour do the exact same thing. They say choose target artifact or enchantment, its owner shuffles it into their library. But we're not quite done messing with our opponents just yet. So now it's time for us to move on to tactic number 8, Helping Hands. First up, we've got Bonds of Mortality, which when it enters the battlefield, we draw a card, and by paying a green, creatures our opponents control lose Hexproof and Indestructible until end of turn. Getting rid of Hexproof and Indestructible can be fantastic ways to help us fight creatures that we otherwise couldn't. And then Nemesis Mask is an equipment that says all creatures able to block a equipped creature do so. So with this, we're guaranteed to draw at least 1 card with our commander. But more importantly, this can be a great way to get all of our creatures through except for 1. And depending on the creature's size, it can take out 1 or multiple creatures, and if it's got Death Touch, even better. Now, getting rid of our opponent's things is great, but we need to protect our own things as well. So let's move on to tactic number 9, Stick Around. First up, we've got Autumn's Veil, which says spells you control can't be countered by blue or black spells this turn, and creatures you control can't be the target of blue or black spells this turn. And then Mask of Avacyn is going to give equipped creature +1/+2 and Hexproof. This can be a fantastic way to protect our commander. And when it comes to protecting our entire team, Wrap and Vigor is a fantastic card for this deck. It's an instant for 1 and a green, and it's going to regenerate each creature we control. 2 mana is a small price to pay for protecting our entire army. Now, fighting is a great way to clear off our opponent's boards, but we've got some other ways to benefit us from fighting as well. So now let's go into tactic number 10, Extra Benefits. First up, there's Rite of Passage, which says whenever a creature you control is dealt damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Foe Razor Regen is similar. When it comes into play, we can have it fight target creature we don't control, and whenever a creature we control fights, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it at the beginning of the next end step. So these can keep growing our creatures bigger and bigger. And finally, there's Ingrass Marauders, which says if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. So this can help our creatures dish out a ton of damage either through fighting or through combat. Again, a huge thanks to Tom for supporting this channel and for picking Neyith. I had a blast building this deck. But now that we've gone through all the cards, let's go over the price breakdown. The average Neyith EDH rec deck is going to set you back $254.76. Our deck is going to be much more affordable, coming in at $49.02. And with all that money that we're going to be saving, let's take a look at some reasonable upgrades. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble. And to put that in, we're going to take out Circuitous Route. Next up, let's add an Apex Altasaur by taking out Aetherwind Basker. And then let's add an Arena by taking out a Mountain. Next up, let's add in Vigor by taking out Aggressive Mammoth. And then let's add in Heroic Intervention by taking out Autumn's Veil. Finally, let's add in Polyraptor by taking out Enray's Forerunners. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this deck are. What direction would you take it? What cards did I not mention that you think should be in the deck? So yeah, let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks again, and have a good one.